thank you for inviting me here. And it was also very interesting to hear about RRF and all that problems that arise. I need to say, for the first, before I go to the cohesion policy, I was also in the team of preparing RRF in Slovenia. It was in 2021, and uh, I have to tell you that sometimes the corruption perception index, which is very much used, the type of index to make sense or make sense of the data on the corruption, it is sometimes biased by the facts that those kind of programs, either cohesion policy or the recovery and resilience funding, are very demanding regarding administration and regarding the rules. Okay, my motivation for starting the preparation of RRF, that recovery and resilience plan for the national framework, was exactly that it was direct European instrument, which direct European instruments are supposed to be less demanding regarding that administration and requirements like from the national bodies. But it turned in very complicated instrument. So if the requirements from the side of the Commission or from the side of the founder are too tight and too strict, then on the other hand, maybe they are not so how can I say, livable and cannot be in the contact with the reality. So here we get the other perception of too tough funding, too tough rules, and not only the rules of law, okay, also the rule of the that agile implementation should be taken into account here. But here we find out that is the same at the cohesion policy. There are too strict rules. There are verification mechanisms that are being created within the process of building up recovery and resilience facility, and they changed all the time. So on the other hand, maybe that corruption perception index do not reflect the real situation, either with the RRF or with the cohesion policy. Now, maybe I will touch a little bit the cohesion policy. If we can go to the next slide, Maria Felice. Yeah, the fact is that cohesion policy is one of the largest investment policy that aimed at reducing economic, social, territorial disparities between states and regions. This is real, and it has a larger history than RRP. RRP was established during the COVID. However, it has faced many stages of somehow said simplifications, which in turn brought us to even more complicated system. So to control that kind of system, I was 12 years almost in a managing authority, 15 years, but a long time ahead of the system and control unit, and also the managing authority dealing with three funds, and this is ERDF, Cohesion Fund, and European Social Fund. What I missed, okay, and we went to the process all the time for these simplification requirements, for state aid application, for proofs of the costs and expenditures and everything. It was a little bit over controlled system. On and I believe that here is a zero tolerance policy for protecting EU financial interests. But on the other hand, we need to find the way how to simplify the procedures to the risk assessment, how to make the procedures more traceable, how to make them more I don't know, a user-friendly framework, also to be motivated to report about frauds and to be able to combat the frauds. We know that no one size fits all. Every country has its own characteristics. Every country has its own problems, and every country has its own system which needs to be accredited, but by the European Commission. And it is the case usually that for the new member states, the Commission was even more strict than for the basic or the founding member states of the European Union. But still, there are some discrepancies in that corruption perception and the real corruption that is happening on the ground. If we can go to the next slide. This is Olaf supported project, but in any case, I think that it's important to know that what it is a part of European Commission, right? And it is concerning EU expenditures, areas of revenue, customs and duties. We know that we have on each application also the provision of the condition of the provision of annual reports of the companies, of the duties that are paid and made the clearance is made on them, but in any case it's sometimes very hard to control this, and if some discrepancies here, we need huge documentation to explain why this is happening. Olaf also has that early detection and execution system. The Commission established it to reinforce the protection of Union financial interests, to ensure sound financial management. And those rules are applicable to all the contracts, grants, agreements, prizes, financial instruments, expert engagement, remuneration, and so on. So, against that unreliable economic operators, we are talking about the exclusion list or registry of the companies that are excluded from the rights to get EU funding. But those exclusion rules are also sometimes very strict and do not take into account the actual situation, what is happening within the company, but on the basis of 1 to 3 years history of the company. So what I found it very interesting, and if we can go to the next slide. European Court of Auditors report. They were analyzing and launching the report on tracking fraud in cohesion spending. And they had very important or very interesting the findings on what managing authorities are responsible for. So what they realized, the first was that managing authorities generally have no specific anti-fraud policy. What is also interesting within those reports is that they are very narrow oriented. They are oriented not to suggest the solutions, or the solutions are suggested based on very much historical acknowledgements and not on some kind of modern approach to solving the problems. Then they found out that managing authorities systematically assess fraud risks, and this process could be further improved. All the time when there is a managing authority that is accredited by the European institutions. And every time they have a contacts with the companies, with different stakeholders, they always can assess a fraud risk, but it is a matter of the culture, and it is the matter of the maturity of the system, how this fraud risk is addressed, and how they start to further improve the risk. So there was one very interesting comparison on in this study, that on preventing fraud and corruption in the European funding. They took example of 50 companies, 50 OPs from the period 2014 to 2020. And what they found out, for example, the remarks, and I tried to, because they offered only positive remarks and the areas of improvement. And what we think that it needs to be done, it needs to be supported by digital technologies. Later on, I will explain a little bit how what is the benefit of emerging technologies here, how we can deal with it, and what the other aspect of dealing with fraud risks and anti-fraud, or prevention of fraud within EU funding can be implemented. So the first remark is that anti-fraud and anti-corruption efforts are more formalized and systematic in 2014 to 2020 programming period. There are areas for improvement. For example, is proportionateness of mitigating measures, which is lowest for the risks of collusive bidding and double funding. Okay, there is no solution offered within the what data do we get into the system, how this data is collected, what is the treatment of data, what is the use of data, and how we can treat that data regarding fraud indication. So I tried to identify at least 5 areas that can be addressed through these mitigating measures. First, needs to be okay. We need to take into consideration the data definition. Here we have identification of the data sources, maybe also the quality of data sources. We can go through or we can assess the quality through the examination of data sources. The third factor is how we encrypt the data. We know that some data is possible to be encrypted and to be standardized and to be treated in the same order, so in the standardized way. The description data, it's very hard to encrypt, and we need to find the models for structuring and description of the data. Then the topic is how we transmit the data. Can the mistake or fraud be made within the transmission of the data? We have different systems. The systems that are operating by the companies are fragmented, are not unique, and we can realize the fraud also in this area. And then the use of the data. So the understanding of the data we take into the system, how we treat this is very important, and to have the deep knowledge on this, what the data is meaning, and how it can be used for not for detecting the fraud, but for proving that this is trust-based and transparent use of the data. Then the next positive remark was, for example, mitigating the measures which are generally proportionate to the self-assessed risks. We know that we are doing self-assessment risks. We have the methodologies for how can I say, a risk assessment analysis that is based on the samples. How we come to those samples? There are methodologies, but they are quite legacy, so they need to be improved. And the European Court of Auditors suggests that some of the authorities may underestimate their self-assessment levels of the fraud risk. Maybe on the contrary, they can improve very much their self-assessment levels with the use of the technologies that are based on strong data recognition. For example, for identification of the potential risks, and as a tool for creating measures for this risk mitigation. Then maybe, okay, most authorities are using the Commission's fraud risk, and not all managing authorities conduct a fraud risk assessment at the OP level. Maybe it is not the case, but this is the case within all the management and control systems. And taking into account advanced digital technologies like AI, for example, we need to make a difference between generative data solutions. We can probably decide also within the management and control systems to use generative data solutions for national databases, or what is somehow unified on the European level. Those are predictive data solutions based on common European tool. And as the last observation from the commission, from the ESA assessment, a more inclusive fraud risk assessment process is better suited than to reduce fraud risk. Okay, so the areas of improvement was suggested. That there is a need for more communication to member state authorities, and they are not proposing how this communication can be strengthened. And again, with advanced digital technologies, we know that there exist decentralized, interoperable communication platforms, either a cloud edge, either digital infrastructures in Europe that can be very well deployed for this into the federated, distributed manner, for the facilitation of risk mitigation, but also for strengthening the communication between authorities. So if we go to the next slide, then if we continue with the main findings, we can find out that they realized that managing authorities have improved the prevention measures, but made no significant progress towards proactive fraud detection. This is probably also why they are not using the advanced digital technologies here. And managing authorities systematically assess fraud risks, but this process could be further improved. Definitely could be improved. And they, for example, there was a kind of innovative fraud prevention measures integrity pacts, which is an agreement in which authority that is responsible for awarding a public contract and the economic operators bidding for the contract undertake to abstain from corrupt practices and ensure transparency. We are all aware that there is existing technology that is enabling The automatic codification of these awarding contracts, it is called smart contract, that is arranging the peer-to-peer communications um, uh, between the parties, and we know that it ensures transparency, it ensures authenticity and integrity of the data that we get from each other's system, and integrity of information that we exchange. So either this communication can be put in legislative form like contract. Either we can use the technology, and here is the key point to which I refer on: how to integrate advanced digital technologies into the fraud detection processes with regard to data analytics. And To conclude, for example, uh, uh, if we go to the next slide, um, we have here emerging technologies that respond to anti-fraud actions. It somehow addresses the strengthening detection, response, and coordination. How we can strengthen detection with the emerging technologies? We can go through the authentication process, the creation of data labels for digital objects, proving product or document authenticity and destination. We can enrich existing digital twin information. Here, relevant technology for example, digital twin, IoT, sensorics, and technology neutral approach through digital product passport. We just need to agree what set of data is relevant for the control functions, and what set of data is relevant for the assurance that there was no or minimum fraud risk during the process. Then the study refers also on response. Uh, Here, what is the relevant technological solutions? We can provide the links to the physical serialization of that digital twin of the product or document, right? It enables the dynamic check of brand's digital identity. We can have brand or type of the document, or any label that is attributable to the document, and definitely the information. It needs to be built to easy integrate additional authentication and anti-tampering services. So here, relevant technologies is again blockchain, distributed ledger, AI, digital twins, and IoT. Then we have coordination, right? How the technologies can be used. We can create the network within the different parties of supply chain to onboarding of the costs. Further, we can facilitate and expedite data on onboarding processes. We can share trusted information to strengthen the risk analysis systems. And finally, we have to the potential use of that technologies. So if we can go to the next slide. For example, I mentioned here AI-driven fraud prevention, machine learning to forensic accounting and financial investigation, for example. And the last, I go through the blockchain characteristics. I will be very fast. Here, for example, AI-driven fraud prevention. It can dynamically detect and stop fraudulent payments by scanning against a wealth of the past data. We have one use case, Payment Guard, which uses machine learning to reference a historical database of customer data. Customers here can be applicants, can be receivers of the funding, can be various stakeholders that are included into the system of cohesion policy. This is in transactions, device information, geolocation. It is very helpful because we identify the costs when they are created. Not to be too long, for example, we need to find out the existing and the emerging patterns, and to use the patterns to predict the trends as they occur. So machine learning for forensic accounting and financial investigation. Here we can talk about the automatization of the extract, transform, and load processes from of investigation from structured or unstructured data sources. If you remember, I was explaining earlier generative and predictive. So generative can be based on unstructured, and structured can be also a tool for predictive models and investigative algorithms. Here, through the result of this extract, transform, and load process, typically here we have a form across engagement, and those processes would have to be custom scripted or encrypted for each engagement. Here we know that we have a large amount of data, so we will also need strong computing systems to embrace all the data, to make a structure, and to learn what type of data and how to structure it. As my last slide, for example, I mentioned also blockchain and fraud detection prevention. What is blockchain technology is very useful in fraud detection prevention. Just a second. Thank you. This is because of the characteristics of blockchain technology. For example, immutability. We have immutable ledger, which is making a revolutionary technology for fraud detection and prevention. We have transparency. Transparency is another remarkable feature of blockchain, making it an effective technology, and so on. It is of decentralized nature. We mentioned a decentralized approach into collecting the data. For example, from this European Court of Auditors report, it is mentioning the databases which are very legacy based. So on the spot checks, internal fraud reporting mechanism, in the identification of fraud indicators, fraud risk management of project beneficiaries, data analytics, fraud hotline for whistleblowers. There are different sources of data, but they are still not covered by the technology as such. So we need to make a system which is of decentralized nature and using definitely smart contracts. I also mentioned smart contracts before. There are self-executing contracts with the terms of the agreement between buyer, user, seller, or different stakeholders or parties. And they can trigger an alert when transaction is done outside, for example, of the business hours, or outside of the information that has the track record, which is the time stamping, which is supported by different characteristics that can help to keep the records authenticated, to keep the records trustful, transparent, and to keep the data also it was wrote down or inserted into the system in the appropriate way, and originated as it should be from the original. So the blockchain is all about anti-fraud, and I would really like also the European institutions and the managing authorities use more blockchain solutions, more AI based, more machine learning for authentication, authorization of the data, for transparency, and for authenticity and integrity of the data. And afterwards, we can count on really minimizing fraud risks and have better anti-fraud policy also on the European level. So thank you very much. I hope that I was understandable and clear.